Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. So, along about 4th or 5th grade, I think it was 4th grade, our school had a tradition whereby the entire class would go camping in the park in the village where I lived. So there was a county park that was right on a river. And there was a boat ramp and shelters and grills and, there was a little church and whatever. And people would go camping and boating and fishing and whatever. And so the whole class would go and pitch tents and spend, like 2 or 3 days in the woods learning about nature and hiking, and then have bonfires and roast marshmallows and sing and whatever. It was the whole class camping out. And so we went and camped out. We all packed our bags and packed lunches and had a game plan, and it was like a bunch of teachers, and I don't remember if the principal was there or who or whatever. And, you spent Saturday roaming the woods, learning about the plants and the trees and the wildlife and, all that kind of stuff. And then Saturday evening, you would camp out and have a bonfire and sing songs and tell stories and look at the stars and, learn, the constellations and, whatever. So that's what we did. And then, we're there all day Saturday and hiking and playing, flag football and, all kinds of stuff. And then, the sun went down and we grilled and everybody, had a big meal, and it was, a big potluck and potato salad and coleslaw and brats and, whatever. And then we all built bonfires and, sat around the fire, telling stories and whatever. And then it was, time to go to bed. So, everybody had pitched a tent and had, a tent partner. My tent partner was this new guy, Vince. And he seemed nice enough. Little wild, but he seemed kind of nice. And, so, we go to bed and fall asleep. And, then suddenly there's like a commotion. And there's like a thrashing storm bearing down on us. Like there was just like this big thunderstorm, and there was like high winds and tents were going down, and people were, very loudly, get on the bus, because, we'd all arrived in one great big school bus. So the teachers were like, just leave your stuff and just get on the bus because, there's a hurricane going on. And they were concerned about, someone getting hurt in the storm and a tornado and whatever. And it's, after midnight. So we all got on the bus and they trundled us back to our little school in the town that was about 4 miles away. And they're like, well, we're all just going to sleep on our sleeping bags, in the gymnasium. And then tomorrow we'll go back to our campsite and, clean up and have our day's activities. And then we'll be done. So, okay. So we all settled down and everyone finally went to sleep. And of course, I was, in my sleeping bag next to Vince, right, near Vince. And Vince had a flashlight. And he kept doing something inside his sleeping bag. He had his flashlight going on, but he was making it. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, haven't you noticed? I'm kind of like, what haven't I noticed? And he's sort of like, well, he sits up and he's got his sleeping bag wrapped around him, like up around his face. And I was sort of like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, you just look at what I'm looking at. I'm like, well, what are you looking at? So I turn, and sitting side by side, he's looking, down the gymnasium, right? He goes, look at the floor. And I was like, what? He goes, the moonlight's coming in. You can see the floor, right? And I'm like, well, yeah. And you can see where everybody's sleeping. I'm like, yeah, right. He goes, look at the floor. And I just stopped moving and I looked at the floor, and it looked like the floor was moving. And that kind of freaked me out just a little bit because I was just like, wait a minute. Because I wasn't paying attention. It was a very subtle movement. And he goes, all right, now watch this. And he turns on his flashlight, and the entire gymnasium floor was covered in cockroaches. And there was a distressing number of cockroaches racing around on that floor. And it doesn't seem logical later. Now that I think about it, like, why would there be so many? Granted, maybe, my memories are off, but I just still have a clear picture in my head of that shocking moment when I saw how many cockroaches were on the floor. And I couldn't fathom it, just couldn't process it. And I've immediately, pulled my legs up underneath of me, and then I pulled my sleeping bag up around my face and cinched it tight like Vince did, because they were all over. They were all around you on all sides, and he would shine his flashlight and they would scurry and stuff like that. And then he would turn the flashlight off and they'd all come back and be moving. And it was just like this subtle moving floor constantly, and it didn't end. And I was just like, that freaked my shit out. I'm not comfortable with cockroaches. I'm not comfortable with bugs, period. Well, they don't really stress me, but it's that amount of bugs all around me, I'm like, okay. And I just sat there. I just stared and was just completely terrified. And I guess it's weird when there's that many bugs in one place. I'm like, there's something wrong here. But our school was very well cared for. It was very well maintained. It was always clean. The garbage was always taken out. The janitors did a great job. The floors were shiny and squeaky clean. And it was clean. It was a clean, nice school. There was no reason why there would be that many cockroaches. And I don't know the life of cockroaches very much, but what were they eating? How could they I don't know. It was weird. It was very strange. And so Vince and I chose to sit back to back, and then we'll just keep, Vince's plan was we'll just keep the sleeping bags up around our faces. And if we fall asleep, then we're leaning against each other, and then we won't have our faces on the floor where the cockroaches can get at us. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's what we did. And eventually we fell asleep, because I just remember suddenly waking up the next morning, and there's just the commotion of people moving around and rolling up their sleeping bags and talking and stuff like that. And the teacher's saying, okay, you guys, time to get up. We got to head back to the park, and go fishing and do our daily program or whatever hell we were going to do. But I just remember laying there and being terrified in that gymnasium, thinking like they're going to be crawling all over me. They're going to be crawling inside of my bag. They're going to be like on top of me. And it's just wrong. That's just so wrong. And I can't believe I fell asleep. I just can't believe I fell asleep. I probably only got like 2 hours of sleep because Vince and I stayed up. Our plan was to stay awake all night long, but that didn't work out. But the important thing about that evening, the whole experience of just like sitting up back to back and watching the floor move and being so, I mean, I don't want to say horrified, but just kind of in shock because there's that many bugs all over, and of course your imagination is going to just work you over, because you're going to start to, you imagine them crawling all over you. I mean, we've all seen too many damn movies, with bugs in them. I remember, seeing movies with, adventurers and falling into pits full of bugs when I was a kid, and here it was actually happening. It's like, that's not supposed to happen. The stuff that goes on in movies, that's not supposed to happen in real life. At least you don't think of it happening in real life. And that's why, scary movies are fun. But here I was, like, just watching all of this motion on the floor and then seeing them scurrying so close to you and all over. And there were so many. And every now and then Vince would take his flashlight out because they would, run when the light was turned on. So he kind of used this flashlight like a broom in a sense. And he would shine the light all around us and the bugs would run away. The cockroaches would run away. And so he kind of did that. And I just remember every now and then kicking out with my leg to, when they would get too close. And I sort of just stopped staring the length of the gymnasium, because just, you got the whole picture then. You got to see because, we were sitting there for a long time with our eyes open. And the longer you sat there with your eyes open, the better your eyes were able to adjust to the dim lighting in that gymnasium. And you could just see that subtle motion of all those bugs. And I was just like, that was just wrong. It just shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And it just seemed to go on forever. And I just remember being wound so tightly in that moment, thinking I just didn't want those bugs to get on my face. I didn't want to fall asleep and have those bugs be on my face and get inside my sleeping bag. Because, I don't know about you, but we've all had those dreams where you wake up and most of us have, I don't know if most of us have, but, some of us, and I've read enough and heard enough to know that, there are more than just me out there, people who have had that nightmare of waking up or thinking you're awake and pulling back the covers and your bed's full of bugs. I think other people have had that nightmare. And so that kind of nightmare compounded the reality. And it was like this moment where fiction and fact were blurred, because what was fiction was now fact. And for, an 11-year-old or whatever, however, 8-year-old, how old we were at that point in time, however old you are in 4th grade is how old we were. And I think that's just a lot for, someone in 4th grade to comprehend. I really do. I feel like that's something you shouldn't have to comprehend, especially in an area, a place that's supposed to be safe and not be sort of masking some kind of horrifying infestation, and I just to this day just wonder how that was possible. And I don't even understand it, and I'm going to sometimes I just tell myself, well, maybe your mind exaggerated it because you were just really terrified of those cockroaches. But I wouldn't be just terrified if there were just a couple of bugs, because I grew up on a farm. Bugs were everywhere. There were all kinds of bugs. I wasn't terrified of bugs. It wasn't, a phobia. I did not have a bug phobia at all. But there was enough bugs there that, clearly I could have developed a phobia, because there were enough cockroaches that they were just everywhere. And they didn't make a sound, not a noise. I didn't hear anything. They just were like zip, 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 zip all over the place. And Vince and I sat back to back and just, watched them. And like I said earlier, we woke up and, of course it was daylight and we both had fallen asleep and were laying on the floor. And the moment I was awake, I tore open my sleeping bag and jumped out of my sleeping bag, and just in case there were some in there or something. And I just kept patting myself down and was just like, okay, are they gone? Are they gone? Are they gone? Maybe that reaction is stemming from, the meadow full of horror spiders experience. I don't know, because that was, a year or two before, or however long it was. But I never thought that would be a scene I would ever see. I mean, obviously I was pretty young, and it's not that you thought about it a lot, but anybody would have that thought that here in this pastoral little town, in eastern Iowa, there wouldn't be this amount of cockroaches scurrying around on the gymnasium floor. But maybe that's something everyone's aware of, and I just was not. I don't know. But reality is, it happened, and I saw it, and I will never forget that shit. I still have never forgotten it. Just that was just super creepy, and it's sort of one of those experiences that has applied itself to, the whole of my life, and all of these experiences add up. They add up, and that's why I'm doing the podcast, because it's sort of life is weird. Life is really strange, and I want to know why mine has had so many bizarre occurrences. That's part of what I'm doing, is trying to explore that and figure it out, and of course share with people, because damn, this is just messed up. Thank you for listening and for allowing me to walk with you down Eldritch Avenue. Next time on Eldritch Avenue, the Elven Secret Stairs, a journey down the big rabbit hole.